Hi everyone. Today is Thursday. Today is your fourth reading lesson and recording. And we're basically going to do more of the same today. And I'll explain that in a second. But we are on chapter 8 in El Rey is Not, I really can't do that. El Rey is Not a Chicken by Sally Warner. And what they want us to be looking for now is to continue because we're talking about becoming experts on, oh, sorry, wrong way. It's the opposite. Okay. We're talking about becoming experts in the author's craft in writing a series. And so, if you've already read a series, what kinds of things we know. So, noticing the vivid words, we talked about what they would be to make a picture in our head. And then precise words, and we said they're very much like vivid words. They're almost exactly the same thing. Precise words just are very precise in helping you to understand exactly what the person is, what the author is trying to get you to see. Like when I said, Mr. Dunner is freaking out instead of saying he's mad, or when you say that someone hates something, that's a really strong word, or even better in the dialogue tags when they say like whispered or muttered. And so those kind of things really help you to understand. They're so specific, okay? And then extraordinary language was what we have been talking about recently. And that is everything we've already talked about. What did the author write? We were calling it literary language before. What did the author write and say? And what does it really mean? Like keeping his nose clean for a whole week meant that he couldn't get in trouble. And so that's important that we go back and think about, even though the author is writing one thing, that it would mean something else. This is a little bit of a longer chapter, but I'm going to stop. And I'm going to stop. Today we're talking about using punctuation like we did the other day and print. And we're still doing punctuation and print. And what you're going to do, I'm going to do it for El Rey Jakes today and put it up here. But what you're going to do, what I'm going to ask you to do when you respond is look for any of this special language. So you could be writing, sorry, it's always backward. You could be writing vivid words, you could be writing precise words, you could be writing this extraordinary language, or you could be putting in punctuation and onomatopoeia words. That's what this is. It's saying special words. It says crash, things like I will not go. They're basically all the same. Any kind of language that stands out to you that author used to help you really understand what you were reading. All right, chapter 8 is called Miss Sanchez Says. Quiet, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Sanchez says on Wednesday morning from the front of the class as she taps her solid gold pen on the desk. We all try to look as if we're paying attention, even though half of the class feels like falling asleep because the room is so hot. And the other half, the half with me in it, wants to run outside and play. It is a beautiful day, just the way Mom said it would be. Pay attention, please, Miss Sanchez says, tapping her pen again. I have an announcement. We're going to do a science experiment. It's Mud Shake Day. But I thought we only had to do science on Tuesdays, Heather Patton says in a really loud whisper. Well, there is a very specific word, and I didn't read it right, so I have to go back and do that. But I thought we only had to do science on Tuesdays, Heather Patton says in a really loud whisper, because you're not supposed to talk in class without raising your hand first. Heather sits behind me in class, and ever since her teenage sister told her she was going to have to cut up a dead frog in science class when she is a teenager, she hates the entire subject. Heather doesn't even like frogs that are alive, much less dead. I'm not exactly looking forward to cutting up a dead frog, by the way, but it might be interesting if the frog didn't get run over and if it died of old age after leading a long and happy life for a frog. So we are learning more about El Rey as a person. Reddy doesn't want to hurt a frog. From now on, Heather, Miss Sanchez says with an ice cube in her voice. Please raise your hand if you have something to say. So Miss Sanchez isn't drinking ice even though it's hot, or drinking water with ice even though it's hot. She's saying something to Heather with an ice cube in her voice. So icy cold, not happy, right? Sorry, Heather mumbles. With this experiment, Miss Sanchez says, sneaking a look at her notes, we will continue our exploration of soil and its components. Okay, components means parts. I happen to know only Miss Sanchez can't just say parts for some reason, probably because it's too simple a word, and we wouldn't get smart if she always said the simple way. So Miss Sanchez has to say soil when she really means dirt, for example. Next to me, Annie Pat Masterson aims a smile at Emma McGraw because they both love science, even when it's just about dirt. Here is what your ideal garden soil is made up of, Miss Sanchez says, and she writes something on the board. 40% sand, 40% silt, 20% clay. Now, who can tell me what this means, she asks. Cynthia raises her hand and starts talking before Miss Sanchez even calls on her, which is typical Cynthia. Ideal means best, she says in a very loud voice, and she smiles using all her teeth and looks around like she's waiting for us to cheer. Like, attention on me. Miss Sanchez sighs. That is correct, Cynthia, she says, but I was really talking about what the numbers on the board mean. Well, I didn't know that, Cynthia says, folding her arms across her chest and frowning, which is never a good sign with her. Cynthia is a girl who knows how to hold a grudge. The whole class sits in silence for a minute, hoping someone will raise their hand. Her hand. So that's a precise word. Her is a precise word because it's specific. We know that they're waiting for some girl to raise her hand. In other words, see, the author now defines what she means. We are counting on Cry Rodriguez to save us. Cry's real name is Kristen, and she is pretty with long black hair. She moved to Oak Glen just before Thanksgiving, and she's very good at math. She slowly raises her hand like there is a red balloon tied to her wrist. Right? How would a balloon go up? So again, there's language the author uses to get a mental picture in your head. So she's not like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Yes, Cry, Miss Sanchez says, smiling in relief. Cry clears her throat. I think the numbers mean that almost half the soil is sand, she says, and almost half is silt, and half of almost half is clay, which adds up to 100%. Big deal, Cynthia Cough says into her hand. Heather laughs to back her up. Whatever silt is, she mutters. And what is silt? Miss Sanchez asks in her coldest voice. So same idea, not an ice cube, but coldest voice. Heather, perhaps you can enlighten us. Enlighten sounds like Miss Sanchez wants Heather to make us all turn white, which most of us in the class are already, basically, except for me, Kevin, and two very quiet girls who go to the same church, not mine. Or else it sounds like our teacher wants Heather to make us light as feathers so we can float up to the ceiling, which would be cool too, but no such luck. That's not what Miss Sanchez means. What enlighten means really means to shine a light on something, only a pretend light, not a real light. In other words, she wants Heather to explain it to us, what silt is. And you can see the kids there, right? I know this, but I do not raise my hand. I do not want Jared and Stanley any madder at me than they already are, which they will be if they think I'm showing off by acting smart in class. I don't know, Heather mumbles again. Anyone, Miss Sanchez asks, but no one raises their hand, not even Cry. Miss Sanchez starts to pull her big blue dictionary from the shelf. Look it up, she usually says when a strange word comes along. Like every minute practically. But all of a sudden, Fiona McNutley slowly raises her hand. This is something that she hardly ever does because she is the shyest kid in class. Yes, Fiona, Miss Sanchez says, trying to hide her surprise. Fiona closes her eyes before she speaks as if she is about to get a shot at the doctor's office. Silt is like this teeny tiny dirt that the water moves around, and when the water goes away, the tiny dirt kind of piles up all over the place, she says, squeaking out the words. My grandpa lives near the Colorado River, she adds, opening one eye as she explains how she knows such an unusual thing. Well, that's basically correct, Miss Sanchez says, after checking her notes once more. Very good, Fiona. Fiona blushes. And so here is our experiment, people, Miss Sanchez says. We have 8 glass jars with lids filled up almost to the top with water. We have 8 mystery soil samples to work with. Teacher always likes to use the word mystery when they're trying to make something boring sound interesting. I'm going to learn that one, kids. But there are 24 kids in our class. But there are 24 kids in our class, Cynthia objects, looking around. So how many students will be in each mudshake team, Miss Sanchez asks, peeking at her watch. Tick-tock, people. Tick-tock means hurry up when she says it like that. Well, we all look at Cry. 3, she says. Correct, Miss Sanchez says. So listen as I call out the teams. Emma, Jared, and Elray, she finally says. Oh, kids. Well, it could have been worse, I remind myself. I could have been Stanley, Jared, and Elray. I want each team to carefully pour its mystery soil sample into its water jar, Miss Sanchez calls out, still reading from her notes. We let Emma do the pouring, of course, because she's a girl and girls are always neater than boys anyway. Now, Miss Sanchez says, I'm going to come around and add a spoonful of alum to each jar before you start shaking. Alum, she pronounces it. Across the room, Annie Pat raises her hand. Why, she asks, what's alum? Like I said before, Annie Pat and Emma love science, and they're always full of questions whenever our class does something the least bit scientific. But that's okay because it uses up time. Miss Sanchez sighs as if she was afraid that Annie Pat or Emma would ask this question. Alum has something to do with aluminum, she says, and for some reason it makes the soil samples separate more easily into their varying layers of sand, silt, and clay, which will help our experiment. But I'd appreciate it if you'd look up alum for us, Annie Pat, and fill us all in first thing tomorrow morning. Okay, Annie Pat tells her, looking important as she writes down her own personal assignment. Miss Sanchez adds a spoonful of the white stuff alum to each jar. Now stir, she tells us, and Emma hands me the popsicle stick, as if stirring things up is obviously my kind of job, so I do it because who cares? Lids on, Miss Sanchez says, and shake. That's going to be Jared's job, of course. Jared the mighty, Jared the strong. In about 2 seconds, he crams the lid on the jar wrong, turns towards me, and starts shaking the mud-filled jar hard, hard, hard. He practically aims it at me without holding down the lid. And flooey. There is mud components of soil, all over my best, almost brand new t-shirt. There it went. That makes sense. That has the San Diego Padres logo on it, everything. San Diego is the largest city near Oak Glen, and it is the very same t-shirt I was supposed to wear to the Sycamore Shopping Center this afternoon with my little sister Alfie and my mom, who's going to buy me a corn dog because I got almost all of my Monday spelling words right for once. It is the t-shirt Jarrett looks at with hungry eyes whenever I wear it. Oh no, Emma cries, holding her cheeks with both hands like the kid in that old movie. Oops, Jarrett says with the happiest look in the world on his big dumb face. Sorry, El Ray. And it's only Wednesday morning. So just take a look at the morning, right? So what I'm going to do now is go back and write down some of those things I stopped and talked about, like the ice cold and the ice cube, and even about him being, how his face looked, just anything I think was important. But when I write it down, I'm going to make sure to explain under it, because if you weren't reading this book with me, you'd need to know that it meant that the teacher spoke in a mad tone. So with an ice cube in her throat means she was speaking coldly and angrily to the student, or sort of not warm, not sweet, okay, to the student. So I would want to explain that. So again, you're looking for any vivid words, any precise words, any extraordinary language they use, which are those similes, comparing things, or idioms, those things that, him trying to keep his nose clean, things like that, or any kind of punctuation that helped you to figure things out, or any onomatopoeia. The book, the chicken sounds, the crash, those kind of things would help you and explain what's happening when you put it there. Again, it doesn't have to be 10 whole pages. It could just be 2. Make sure you include the title of your book, put in whatever your language is, a couple examples, and then explain why that is important, or how that is helping you. What does it really mean? Okay, I'm really proud of you. It's Thursday. It's your last entry for today. And by tomorrow, I'd like to see one of this week's entries with all of these things, or one of these things in it, just whatever you're doing. So something about this week in the language. That would be awesome. Great job, guys. Keep it up. Bye.